First, it's important that those of you who are first responders and other service providers know how to spot legal issues for our citizens affected by disaster after you have provided that initial emergency assistance. Let's take a look at what some of those might be.
Issue spotting for non-lawyers. When hurricanes and other natural disasters strike, first responders make sure people have the basics: food, shelter, utilities, and medical care. As professionals making early contact with survivors, first responders play a key role in identifying legal risks that people face. Taking action early can save someone's home, job, or even their life. This video will show you a few things to look for and give you actions to take. First, people don't realize that following a disaster, certain deadlines may be extended, including court hearings and filing dates, and many payment due dates. Lawyers can help with these requests. Second, if someone has lost a job due to a disaster, they may qualify for disaster unemployment assistance. You can direct them to the Department of Employment and Workforce to apply. Third, if someone is being evicted, they can't live in their home because of damage resulting from the disaster. They may have rights. This is particularly important for lower-income survivors who are at risk of becoming homeless. You can direct them to the South Carolina Bar Disaster Hotline at 877-727-2227, extension 120, or South Carolina Legal Services at 888-346-5592. Fourth, if someone seems to not know about FEMA benefits, or if they complain that they have been denied by FEMA, you can refer them to the South Carolina Bar Disaster Hotline, or SCLS. 5. If someone does not understand that they can file an insurance claim, you can note this and make a referral to the South Carolina Bar Disaster Hotline, or SCLS. 6. If someone mentions family-related issues like not being able to make child support payments or worrying about custody and visitation issues for their children, a lawyer might be able to help them. 7. Documents can be critically important in dealing with any of these issues. If it's not too late by the time you get to a disaster survivor, remind them to grab or even take a photo of some key documents, like home deeds, birth or marriage certificates, leases, or insurance documents. Finally, you can warn people about debt relief scams and home repair fraud, and refer them to the South Carolina Bar or South Carolina Legal Services if they have been the victim of fraud. You can also refer them to the Department of Consumer Affairs at this number.
There are certain important documents that you'll need to have with you that are hard to replace. You may need different documents because of your situation, but let's talk about the top 6 documents that you are going to need when disaster strikes.
Safeguarding documents. The basics. Disaster can strike at any time and with little notice. There are certain important documents and items you may need after a disaster and that are difficult to replace. Do not wait until a disaster is imminent to gather these items. Prepare now. You can do this by making copies and storing them somewhere away from your home, but that is still safe and secure. You can also add them to an emergency preparedness kit that you can take with you on short notice. In a pinch, you can at least snap photos of these on a smartphone. It's much better than nothing. But always lock your phone. Identity theft is also a danger. Here are the top 6 documents that everyone should keep safe. 1. Basic identification. Make sure you have at least a copy of a driver's license, birth certificate, passport, or green card. Ideally, you'll have all of these, so we kind of cheated. Critically, in order to qualify for emergency FEMA assistance, you need to be able to prove that you are a U.S. citizen or a lawful resident. 2. Health insurance card. Keep your card with you. You should also snap a photo of the card and email it to yourself. You'll want to minimize the chances that you'll be denied access to health care after a disaster just because you don't have a card. 3. A list of important medications and doses. In case you are unable to return home for a while, And if your healthcare providers are also displaced, it's good to have a reminder of the medications you need. 4. Real estate deed or lease. Proof of where you live is critical. It can be important for qualifying for various kinds of government benefits and to defend against an eviction. For example, if a landlord tries to keep you from returning home. 5. A basic household inventory, ideally with photos or videos. This is useful for a variety of reasons, but can be particularly important for insurance claims. 6. Other important insurance documents, particularly disability insurance or any disaster-related insurances, flood, homeowners, renters, whatever you've got. If you have this basic set of documents backed up and with you, you will save yourself a lot of headaches. You can get started by just taking photos on your phone.
You'll need those documents when you apply for FEMA benefits. The Federal Emergency Management Agency has 2 programs, the Individual and Households Program, as well as the Small Business Administration Loans Program. Let's learn about what these programs provide and how to avoid a denial of those all-important FEMA benefits.
FEMA Benefits Overview. FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, provides benefits to people who live or work in disaster areas. FEMA has 2 programs designed to help people recover after a disaster. The Individuals and Households Program, or IHP, provides temporary emergency assistance during and right after the disaster. This is money to help with things like temporary housing, repairs, replacement, transportation, childcare, and more. This is capped at about $35,000 in 2020. Then, there's longer-term recovery efforts, like rebuilding housing or repair equipment and getting businesses up and running again. FEMA works with another agency called the Small Business Administration, or SBA, to give low-interest loans to help cover these costs. The IHP program also includes something called Other Needs Assistance, basically meaning everything but housing, including medical or dental expenses that resulted from a disaster. FEMA will require you to apply for SBA loans in order to be considered for these grants. But you can always turn down a loan if you don't want one. FEMA only covers expenses not covered by insurance, so you first have to file a claim with your insurance company. To qualify, you have to show that you were denied insurance coverage, or if insurance doesn't cover the full cost of repairs or replacement. FEMA will pay for expenses while an insurance claim is pending, but you will need to repay any FEMA benefits received which were later covered by insurance. You can apply by phone, online, or in person. After you apply, an inspector will call you to set up a time for a property inspection. The inspector determines the extent of the damage, whether it was caused by the disaster, your residency, and ownership. Be there for the inspection. Have proof that you own the property and point out all of the damage to the inspector. FEMA will issue a written decision within 7 to 10 days of the inspection, telling you if you are eligible for assistance, for what programs, and for how much money. If the claim is denied in full or in part, the letter will explain why it was denied and how to appeal. FEMA Appeals 1. Avoiding application mistakes. The best way to win a FEMA appeal is to not make any mistakes in the first place. So, let's talk about how to present a perfect application. 1. Do everything they ask in the application, and be sure it is well presented and organized. Don't give them a box of receipts. And don't write a long description of the damage. Write a simple cover letter listing everything you are submitting. 2. Make sure you have all of the required documentation. Lack of documentation is one of the most common reasons for denial of FEMA benefits. If FEMA asks for documentation that doesn't exist or has been lost, mention this, in writing and by phone, and offer an alternative. 3. Document the damage. It is critical to document the damage to your home as soon as possible. Take photos and write a detailed description. FEMA will send an inspector. Make sure you are home when the inspector comes. Give them your cell number and engage with them when they get to your home. Show them all of the damage, but don't lie or exaggerate. 4. Keep every receipt for anything you buy to repair the home. Take photos of them on your mobile device as a backup. And try to avoid paying for anything in cash. You want to be able to access electronic records. If FEMA audits you, they will review the receipts and require repayment if the money was not used for the purpose stated in your application. 5. Don't throw away documents after you file your application. Even keep notes from telephone calls with FEMA representatives. Keep everything for at least 3 years. Some tips for communicating with FEMA. 1. There are deadlines for every step. If you are unsure about a deadline, call FEMA or visit their website. 2. If you miss a deadline, file anyway in case an exception can be made. For example, if you were in the hospital, you'll need to explain why you missed the deadline and specifically ask that they make an exception. 3. Be persistent on appealing each decision, including demands for repayment. Don't give up.
Now we get to your rights as a tenant if you're renting your home. These next 3 videos cover when your home is partially habitable and you want to stay there. When your home is damaged to the point that you can't live there anymore. And then finally, when your home is damaged and needs repair, but it's otherwise livable. Okay, let's get started on your rights when you're a renter.
Your rights as a tenant when a disaster happens. Housing damage is common after a disaster. This video will walk you through your rights as a tenant if your rental home is partially habitable and you want to stay. This means that part of your home is destroyed, but part is still livable. So long as the government has not condemned or otherwise prohibited you from staying in the home, you can stay. If your use of the home is substantially impaired, you can terminate the lease within 7 days' notice to your landlord in writing. There is no exact definition of substantially impaired, but if a home has rooms that are totally unusable, you have a good case. The landlord is entitled to a reasonable opportunity to make repairs, usually about 14 days. But what if you still want to stay? If your use of the property is greatly limited, say 1 or more rooms are essentially unusable, your rent should be based on the fair market value of the usable part. Immediately notify the landlord in writing of the damages to the property and the part that is usable. There's also no clear definition of fair market value, but a good bet is to deduct the part that's not usable. 2 rooms out of 4 have major damage? Suggest deducting rent by half. Try to come to an agreement with the landlord about reducing the rent while repairs are being made. If the landlord won't agree to a reduced rent amount while you wait for repairs, you'll need evidence to show a fair rent amount. Like in our example, if half of the house can be used and you want to just pay half the rent amount, you need evidence that only half of the home is usable, like photos, testimony of witnesses who may have been in those rooms. Finally, it's important to note that the home can be condemned even if some parts remain livable. This means the local government says that no one is allowed to live there. So even if you want to stay in a place that's in bad shape, you might not be able to. The government can condemn a partially damaged home even if you want to stay. Tenants' rights during a disaster. Housing damage is common after a disaster. This video will walk you through your rights as a tenant if your rental home is damaged to the point where you can't live there anymore. The home must be substantially impaired. There's no clear definition of this, but it generally means that it has been or should be condemned, you can't live safely there, or the home is just gone. If your home is uninhabitable and you want to move out, it's your right to do so. You can immediately vacate and send a written notice to your landlord terminating your rental agreement in writing within 7 days of moving out. Your letter should say, A, that you are forced to move out because the home is uninhabitable due to the disaster. B, the date you were forced to move. C, that you request the return of your deposit and any prepaid rent. Then mail or hand-deliver the letter to your landlord. If you hand-deliver the letter, or take a photo of it being delivered, with a date stamp, like on a smartphone. After this, the landlord has to return your security deposit and any prepaid rent, including for the current month. The landlord can deduct for back rent you owe and damages you caused that are not related to the disaster. The landlord will need to send a written statement itemizing what the deductions are for. If you disagree with the deductions the landlord made, you have the right to challenge them in court to get all or some of it back. And the landlord has the right to challenge whether the home was truly not habitable. Video 8. Tenants' rights during a disaster. Housing repairs. Housing damage is common after a disaster. This video will walk you through your rights as a tenant if your rental home is damaged and needs repairs, but it's otherwise livable. This includes situations where essential services for the home have been damaged or destroyed. This includes things like electrical systems, plumbing, sanitation, gas, heating, hot water, and ventilation. In any rental house in South Carolina, the landlord must keep the place in good repair. In legal language, this is called fit and habitable. Tenants have to keep the unit reasonably safe and clean, but it is the landlord's obligation to repair major damage and restore essential services. This is true even if the damage is the result of a disaster. In this situation, your lease is still in effect and you have the right to a fit and habitable home. Notify your landlord in writing of the needed repairs and request that they be made. You need to let the landlord know before taking any other action. Your landlord should make the repairs within a reasonable amount of time, like starting the repairs within 14 days of receiving the written notice. If they don't, you can terminate your lease and leave, providing that the notice stated that you'd leave if the repairs weren't made, or take them to court to require them to make the repairs. You can also ask the court to reduce the rent because the damage has lowered the rental value of the home. You can also ask the court to require the landlord to reimburse you for the cost of repairs. But you should not withhold rent to offset the cost of the repairs before getting the landlord's consent or the court's approval. To start this process, you have to file a claim with your local magistrate's court. You can find a list of all magistrates organized by county on the SC Court's website. For more detailed information, take a look at South Carolina Legal Services online classroom on housing repairs.
If you own your home and need repairs after a natural disaster, it's important to know how to make a fair contract with a home repair contractor, as well as how to avoid the fraud that often happens in that situation.
Contractor Fraud 1. Creating a fair contract. Survivors of disasters are targets for fraud. Scam artists often head to disaster areas to prey on people who are vulnerable, posing as building contractors, debris removers, and other fraudulent businesses. They will try to take your money. For this reason, it's critical to be informed and careful when hiring a contractor after a disaster. Remember, contracts are binding. A lawyer can help to make sure that the contract terms are fair and reasonable. Here's what a healthy relationship with a contractor looks like. Your contract is with a business that you know or that you have researched ahead of time and have positive references on. It is not with someone who knocked on your door. Your contract is set up with payments based on milestones of completed work. You got estimates from 3 different contractors before you chose this one. The contract is in writing and you read it carefully, or better yet, had a lawyer review it for you. The contract includes 1. The contractor's name, street address, telephone, and license number. 2. The total amount to be paid for the job. 3. The payment schedule. 4. An estimated start and end date. 5. The contractor's obligation to obtain all necessary permits. 6. A fair process for handling changes to the contract. 7. Warranties covering materials and workmanship. 8. Contact information for warranty companies, the length of the warranty period, and anything not covered by the warranty. The contractor provides proof that they have up-to-date insurance coverage, usually workers' compensation, property damage, and liability. Payment under your contract is to be made by check or money order, so you will have evidence of payment readily available. There is no legitimate reason to request other forms of payment, like reloadable debit cards or gift cards. The contractor is not from out-of-town businesses, nor are they a FEMA-certified contractor. There is no such thing. Your contractor understands you won't sign completion papers or make final payment until the work is done correctly. If you feel vulnerable and not in control and you need help with the contract process, call SC Legal Services or the SC Bar Association. Contractor fraud. Your rights post-contract. Survivors of disasters are targets for fraud. Scam artists often head to disaster areas to prey on people who are vulnerable, posing as building contractors, debris removers, and other fraudulent businesses. They will try to take your money. For this reason, it's critical to be informed and careful when hiring a contractor after a disaster. Once you have that contract, it's important to be vigilant and protect your rights. Make sure the contractor finishes the job. Don't make the final payment or sign a certificate of completion until these 6 things happen. 1. All of the work meets the standards spelled out in the contract. 2. Permit issuers have inspected and approved the work. 3. You have received written warranties for materials and workmanship. 4. You have received proof that all subcontractors and suppliers have been paid. 5. They have cleaned up the work area. 6. You have inspected and approved the completed work. If you have a complaint about the work, try to resolve the issue with the contractor first. If you do resolve the problem, you should put it in writing and get it signed by the contractor. Then follow with a letter or email that says exactly what was agreed to. If you are working with a lawyer, they may be able to help you with resolving the complaint. If you can't resolve it and you think you've been defrauded, you can call your local law enforcement agency.
Finally, you need to be careful about identity theft because you're really vulnerable to that after a disaster. Here are some important tips to help you avoid identity theft after a natural disaster.
Identity theft after a disaster. Identity theft tends to increase after a natural disaster. To avoid identity theft, be very cautious before providing personal identifying or financial information to anyone, especially those who contact you after a natural disaster, online, on the phone, in person. It can happen anywhere. Some tips to prevent identity theft. 1. Require photo ID from anyone who claims to represent a government agency. No one should have access to look around or check out your damage to give an estimate. 2. Don't click on any links sent to you online offering help unless you are certain that they are from a trusted source. These are often scam artists who can often steal your identity just by you clicking a link that gives them access to your computer. 3. If you have already applied for benefits from your insurance company, FEMA or SBA, they will give you a registration number. That number is the best way to protect yourself from scammers because they won't have that number. Ask anyone who calls claiming to be from FEMA or SBA to provide the number before you talk to them. 4. Imposters may come to your door and have FEMA gear, like a hat or shirt, on. Ask for identification because FEMA representatives are required to have their official government identification card and to provide it to you. If you suspect the identification is not real, you should call FEMA to verify their identification. 5. Don't throw away papers that have your personal information, like credit card statements or bills. Identity thieves will go through trash and find them and use them to steal your identity. Don't just tear it up. Always shred. 6. All credit card offers, loan offers, live loan checks, and other financial solicitations in the mail should be shredded so the information is destroyed. Identity thieves can use these to get money, credit, and loans using your name.